Although I have been closely tied to working in a church by being a pastor's wife, I realized that the last time I spent really pursuing spiritual development was during the School of Biblical Studies in 1985. Since then, I have raised 2 boys and have embarked on a career in education. I've had sporadic intentional spiritual formation over this time. The last 20 years, the bulk of my time has been spent in the pursuit of professional development. The last 4 years in particular have been characterized by a constant stream of never-ending work between teaching a class and being involved in administration. Although I love my job, I have felt like a hamster on a wheel, constantly running and never able to get off. Time has been something to be managed and mastered, and mostly devoted to work with very little rest. Long days, evenings, and weekends have revolved around school and work. It was all meaningful and necessary work as we pioneer a new Christian school in Hong Kong. At the end of last year, I felt that I could no longer sustain this endless frenzy of work. I made a decision to leave the classroom and focus solely on administration. At the start of the school year, we had a group come in and pray for people individually. I was first to sign up, eager to hear from God and hopeful to start a new year with a different, less frenetic focus. As I sat down, the people praying spent some time in silence to hear from God. The picture God showed them was of me in a field with a hoe, breaking up hard ground and being very tired. God was going to give me a gift of rest this year. I was to be open to God, to go where He leads me. I am not to feel guilty for the rest. In many ways, the change in roles, although still really busy, is in no way as busy as before. And yes, I do feel guilty leaving earlier when teachers are still working till later, but I know that this is God's gift to me. Part of that gift is Basileia, a time to focus on spiritual formation and focus on the refreshment of my soul, the outworking of God's kingdom into my life. There has been little time for this, particularly in the last 4 years. But how can this happen by adding a spiritual formation course with all its readings and meetings to my already very full load? The first module in Basileia has brought answers to this question, not necessarily in a relieving of time, but rather in a mindset shift. Firstly, time, place, and rhythm. Christ Plays in 10,000 Places by Eugene Peterson talks about the gift of time and place. My focus has been on time as a commodity, now, tomorrow, next month, next year, and so on. As an educator, we are always looking to the future and not really able to enjoy the here and now. As a task-oriented person, I am always thinking about how other things are taking me away from and preventing me from getting my real job done. But if time and place are a gift from God, to not recognize them as gifts is to be ungrateful to the giver. Or as Eugene Peterson says, violations of sacred time become desecrations of our most intimate relations with God and one another. A shift is slowly happening in my mind as I hold the idea of time and place as a gift. Peterson speaks of the rhythm of creation, the rhythm of time, the rhythm in our very being, breathing, heart beating. I am realizing that whether I pay attention to it or not, my life has rhythm, but the rhythm has been off in my life, as brought home by a physical extra heartbeat recently. I have fallen into this rhythm: get up, go to work, come home, flop into a chair, and watch a video, as a supposed rest. But this is not a steady, healthy rhythm. As Eugene puts it, we have to recover the rhythm. There is no need to rush everywhere. I am always annoyed at having to stop for crossing lights, and although I know it is against the law, often cross anyway in my rush to get places. But recently I have started to see them as a gift, to be able to stop for those few moments. I am taking the time to look up at the sky and around at my surroundings, people, trees, birds, men high atop scaffolding. Rather than rushing with my head down, thinking of the next thing I need to get to, a few minutes will not make a huge difference. This is God's gift to me of time, pause, creation, in that moment, in that place, wherever it may be. Another way for me to recover the rhythm is through praying with the church. I've delved into praying with the church through a book by Ken Wilson called Mystically Wired. He suggested The Divine Hours by Phyllis Tickle. I have done this on and off, but only in the morning. In Scott McKnight's article, Praying with the Church, he quotes Phyllis Tickle. It was understood, that is, that at set hours each day, the faithful would interrupt the business of vocational life in order to praise and worship the Almighty One. thereby not only offering an appropriate sacrifice of time and deliberate intention, but also assuring that the thoughts and actions of each worshiper had been returned to the source from which he or she had come, and to which he or she would ultimately be accountable. Rob and I usually start our day with the morning prayers from the Divine Office. Lately, I have tried to stop what I'm doing at 12, put my earphones on in the office, and go through the noon prayers. I want to remind myself that I am not the center, nor am I essential to the running of the school. Rather, I recognize my source in the middle of a hectic and even day fraught with conflict, as often happens. I can focus my mind on Christ and who I am ultimately accountable to for all that I do and say. Secondly, people. As a task person, people are not high on my priority. I'm always delighted to be in nature and gain great sustenance from seeing a beautiful sunset, enjoying beautiful plants and flowers, or watching animals in their natural habitat. Especially life-giving is to be around water, whether ocean, lake, or stream. In his book, Christ Plays in 10,000 Places, Eugene Peterson writes that there is a great deal of so-called creation appreciation, or love of nature, that prefers to look the other way when men and women appear on the scene. Genesis 2 will not permit it. Men and women are integral to creation, as the garden with its trees and rivers and its animals and birds. This part of the book struck me quite strongly. Professionally, I am working on being a better listener and more focused on people. And now spiritually, God is putting his finger on the area through Genesis in its basic focus on brothers and our responsibility to preserve relationship. Through the work of Jason Georges and Mark D. Baker in ministering in honor-shame cultures, I am being trained in how to respond to those who are from a shame-honor culture in order to preserve harmony and relationships at work. And the work of Benner and Sacred Companions teaches me that to be present, to listen to someone, is an act of hospitality. As a Martha, the practical is always more important to me and more useful. But as Benner says, we can only be present with others if we are able to be present with ourselves and God. What I do or say is ultimately not all that important. The most important thing I can do is help the other person be in contact with the graciousness of Christ. It is a gift of being rather than doing. I am learning to take that gift of the moment of time and enjoy conversations with children who walk through our doors and other adults, being interested in them for who they are and not for what I can get out of them. A birthday party invitation becomes a time to celebrate with someone rather than an obligation taking away from my time. This is the gift of hospitality. Eugene Peterson reminds me that if I am going to celebrate this gift of place in which the Lord has placed me, I'm going to have to embrace the people around me with the same delight I do the soaring hawks and the violets blooming at my feet. Men and women, children and the elderly, the beautiful and the plain, the blind and the deaf, amputees and paralytics, the mentally impaired and the emotionally distraught, each a significant and sacred detail of nature of God's creation. Thirdly, Sabbath. I need to reorder my thinking about Sabbath, and Eugene in Christ Plays in 10,000 Places brings correction to this idea. I've long been fascinated by the verse in Leviticus 16:31 when talking about the Day of Atonement. God instructs his people, "It is a Sabbath of solemn rest to you, and you shall afflict yourselves. It is a statute forever." God wanted them to afflict themselves, to deny themselves. We don't usually think of a Sabbath and a day of rest as an affliction, but in fact, to truly have a Sabbath, I need to afflict myself, or as Eugene puts it, it must be a focal practice, or a discipline, which takes planning, purposefulness, and in some cases, affliction. The focal practice of not doing anything, stopping work, worshiping in community, wandering over creation, or a hike through the hills is intended to remind me of my place in creation. I am not God. As Wendell Berry writes, the mind that comes to rest is tended in ways that it cannot intend, is born, preserved, and comprehended by what it cannot comprehend. Your Sabbath, Lord, thus keeps us by your will, not ours, and it is fit our only choice should be to die into that rest or out of it. It's a time to take my bearings, and so through these mind shifts, I am once again aligning myself to my true north, God, my Creator and Maker.